Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the mining station, his heart pounding as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. The emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow, and somewhere in the distance, alarms continued their piercing wail. He clutched the small, injured creature closer to his chest, feeling its rapid breathing against his protective vest. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen during his 5 years working the asteroid belt. It was roughly the size of a house cat, but covered in scales that shimmered between deep blue and silver. Small wings, currently folded against its body, suggested it might be capable of flight when fully grown. Most striking were its eyes, large, intelligent, and filled with what Marcus could only describe as ancient wisdom. Despite the creature's obviously young age. "They're getting closer," Marcus whispered to the injured youngling, though he doubted it could understand him. The creature had been found in the debris of what appeared to be a destroyed ship, badly injured and alone. The station's automatic systems had classified it as an unknown biological entity, triggering containment protocols that Marcus knew would result in the creature being handed over to the Galactic Research Consortium for experimentation. Marcus had worked with the consortium before. He knew what happened to specimens in their labs. Nothing ever came out alive. The footsteps were closer now, accompanied by the mechanical whirring of enforcement drones. Marcus looked down at the creature in his arms. One of its small legs was clearly broken, and there were burn marks along its side from whatever had destroyed its ship. Despite its injuries, the creature looked up at him with those remarkable eyes, and Marcus felt something he had never experienced before, a connection that transcended species. "I'm not letting them take you," he said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Marcus had never been particularly brave. He was a maintenance technician, nothing more. He fixed broken equipment, managed life support systems, and kept the mining operation running smoothly. He had always followed orders, never caused trouble, and certainly never stolen valuable specimens from the Galactic Research Consortium. But something about this small, defenseless creature had awakened something protective deep within him. The sound of scanning equipment indicated the enforcement team was checking each room systematically. They would reach his hiding spot within minutes. Marcus looked around desperately, his mind racing through possible escape routes. The maintenance shafts were too narrow for the enforcement drones, but they would be monitoring all the exits. The cargo bay had ships, but they were all locked down under emergency protocols. Then Marcus remembered the old service tunnel that led to the waste processing center. It had been abandoned years ago when the new system was installed, but the passage might still be intact. More importantly, it led to the emergency pods that were kept outside the main security grid. "Hang on, little one," Marcus whispered, adjusting his grip on the creature as he prepared to move. He slipped out of his hiding spot and moved quickly but quietly through the maze of corridors. The creature remained still in his arms, somehow understanding the need for silence. Marcus had always been good with technical systems, and he used his knowledge of the station's layout to avoid the main corridors where the enforcement teams were searching. The entrance to the old service tunnel was behind a maintenance panel that most people had forgotten about. Marcus quickly removed the cover and peered into the narrow passage. It was dark, cramped, and filled with old pipes and cables, but it appeared to be passable. He had just started to climb into the tunnel when a voice behind him called out, "Stop right there, Chen!" Marcus froze, recognizing the voice of Commander Voss, the station's head of security. Slowly, he turned around, still holding the injured creature. "Commander," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. I know exactly what you were doing," Voss interrupted, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "You're interfering with a consortium operation. That specimen needs to be turned over for proper study." "Specimen?" Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "This is a living being, Commander. It's injured and scared." Voss stepped closer, and Marcus could see that the man's expression was not entirely unsympathetic. "Look, Chen, I know you mean well, but this is bigger than you understand. That creature isn't just some random animal. Our preliminary scans indicate it might be from one of the restricted sectors, possibly even from the Dragon Realm." The Dragon Realm. Marcus had heard whispers about it during his years in the asteroid belt. It was supposed to be a legendary region of space where an ancient and powerful species lived in isolation, rarely making contact with the rest of the galaxy. Most people considered it to be nothing more than spacers' tales, but the consortium clearly took it seriously. "If that's true," Marcus said carefully, "then this creature has family somewhere, people who are looking for it." "Which is exactly why the consortium needs to study it," Voss replied. "We need to understand these beings before—" The conversation was interrupted by a low, harmonic sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The emergency lights flickered, and Marcus felt a strange vibration through the station's hull. The creature in his arms suddenly became alert, its eyes widening as it lifted its small head. "What the hell was that?" Voss muttered, touching his communication device. "Bridge, report." The response came immediately, crackling with static and panic. "Commander, we have multiple unknown contacts approaching the station. They're huge, sir, bigger than anything in our database, and they're moving in formation." Marcus felt the creature in his arms begin to make soft, musical sounds, not distress calls, but what seemed like attempts at communication. The youngling was trying to respond to whatever was out there. "It's calling to its family," Marcus realized aloud. Voss stared at him, then at the creature as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Dear God, Chen, do you realize what you've done? If those are Dragon Realm ships, and they think we've harmed their young—" The station shuddered as something large made contact with the docking bay. The lights went out completely for a moment before the backup power kicked in, bathing everything in that ominous red glow once again. "All personnel to emergency stations," came the announcement over the communication system. "We have been boarded by unknown entities. All personnel are to remain calm and comply with any instructions." Marcus looked down at the injured creature, whose musical calls were becoming stronger despite its injuries. "They came for you, didn't they?" he whispered. The creature looked up at him with those ancient, intelligent eyes, and Marcus felt a moment of profound understanding pass between them. This small being was important, not just to its own kind, but potentially to the future of relations between species. "Commander," Marcus said, turning to Voss, "we need to get this youngling to its family. Whatever they are, they're here for their child." Voss hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the rapidly developing situation. The sound of heavy footsteps was approaching their location, but these footsteps were different from before, heavier, more purposeful, and accompanied by what sounded like the whisper of scales against metal. "Chen," Voss said quietly, "if those are Dragon Realm beings, they could destroy this entire station without breaking a sweat. The only thing that might save us is returning their child," Marcus finished. "I know." The footsteps stopped just around the corner. Marcus could hear low, rumbling voices speaking in a language that seemed to resonate in his bones. The creature in his arms responded with its musical calls, and the voices grew more urgent. "Stay behind me," Voss instructed, drawing his weapon but keeping it pointed downward. "Let me handle this." 3 figures rounded the corner, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. They were indeed dragon-like, but far more magnificent than anything from human mythology. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, they moved with fluid grace despite their size. Their scales were deep emerald and gold, and their eyes held the same ancient intelligence as the youngling, but magnified 100-fold. They wore what appeared to be armor that seemed to be made from the same material as their scales, and each carried weapons that hummed with energy. The lead figure looked at Voss, then at Marcus, and finally at the creature in Marcus's arms. When it spoke, its voice was like controlled thunder, and somehow Marcus understood the words, despite never having heard the language before. "You have our young," the dragon being stated simply. Marcus stepped forward before Voss could respond, still holding the injured creature carefully. "Yes," he said. "I found it in the debris from a destroyed ship. It's hurt, but I've been trying to protect it." The three dragon beings exchanged glances, and Marcus caught fragments of their rapid conversation. They seemed surprised, and he gathered that they had expected to find their youngling in a laboratory or holding cell. The lead dragon being approached slowly, its movements careful and non-threatening, despite its imposing size. It looked down at the creature in Marcus's arms, then at Marcus himself. "You could have given the young one to your authorities for study," it observed. "Why did you not?" Marcus met those ancient eyes steadily. "Because it's a child," he said simply. "It was scared and hurt, and it needed protection. I couldn't let them hurt it." The dragon being studied Marcus for a long moment, then gently reached out its clawed hands. Marcus carefully transferred the injured youngling, watching as the dragon being examined its wounds with obvious concern and expertise. "The injuries are not severe," the dragon being announced to its companions. "The young one will heal." It turned back to Marcus. "You risked much to protect what was not yours to protect." "It was the right thing to do," Marcus replied. The dragon being tilted its head, considering this response. "Your species is known to us, but your actions are unexpected. We have heard that humans are ambitious, aggressive, and motivated primarily by personal gain." "Some of us are," Marcus admitted, "but not all of us." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more station personnel, including Captain Rodriguez, the station commander. Rodriguez took one look at the dragon beings and immediately ordered his security team to lower their weapons. "I'm Captain Rodriguez," he announced. "I assume you're here for your young one?" The lead dragon being acknowledged him with a slight nod. "I am Guardian Prime Talos of the Draconic Protectorate. We came when we detected our youngling's distress signals. We expected to find it in your laboratories." "Actually," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "it was this technician who found your child and has been protecting it from being taken for experimentation." Guardian Prime Talos looked at Marcus again with what might have been surprise. "This is truth?" "Yes, sir," Voss interjected. "Chen here violated direct orders and risked his career to keep your youngling safe." The other two dragon beings moved closer, and Marcus found himself the focus of 6 ancient, intelligent gazes. The youngling in Talos's arms made soft musical sounds and reached one small claw toward Marcus. "The young one has bonded with you," Talos observed with what might have been wonder. "This is unprecedented." "Bonded?" Marcus asked. "Dragon young choose their protectors," one of the other beings explained. "It is instinctual, and it is never given lightly. In our realm, such a bond is considered sacred." Marcus felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest as he looked at the small dragon. "I just did what anyone should do for a child in danger." "No," Talos said firmly. "Not anyone. Your own kind would have delivered the young one to those who would have caused harm for the sake of knowledge. You chose differently, despite the cost to yourself." The station's communication system crackled to life. "This is Admiral Hendricks of the Galactic Research Consortium Fleet. We are en route to secure the alien specimen. All station personnel are ordered to maintain containment until our arrival." The 3 dragon beings exchanged looks that Marcus couldn't interpret, but he sensed a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Guardian Prime Talos spoke in his own language to his companions, and Marcus caught the tone of command. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked. "The consortium fleet approaches," Talos explained. "They come to claim our young for their experiments. This cannot be permitted." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "Guardian Prime, Perhaps we can work out some kind of diplomatic solution." Talos shook his great head. "You do not understand, Captain. The consortium has taken young ones of various species before, always with promises of scientific cooperation and mutual benefit. None have ever been returned. We will not allow this to happen to our own." Marcus felt the youngling's distress even before it began making worried sounds. The small dragon was looking back and forth between Marcus and its own kind, clearly distressed by the growing tension. "Wait," Marcus said suddenly. "There might be another way." All eyes turned to him, and Marcus realized he was about to suggest something that would change his life forever. "What if I went with them?" he said quietly. "To your realm, as the youngling's protector, or whatever you call it. If the bond is sacred to your people, maybe that would give us some diplomatic immunity or something." The dragon beings stared at him in what appeared to be shock. Even Captain Rodriguez and Commander Voss looked stunned. "You would leave your own kind?" Talos asked incredulously. "To protect a young one that is not even your species? If it means keeping the youngling safe from people who would hurt it, yes," Marcus said without hesitation. The youngling in Talos's arms made urgent musical sounds, reaching toward Marcus again. Talos looked down at the small dragon, then back at Marcus, his expression unreadable. "Such a thing has never been attempted," Talos said slowly. "A human living among the Draconic Protectorate, serving as guardian to one of our young—" "But is it possible?" Marcus pressed. Before Talos could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The consortium fleet had arrived, and Marcus could see through the nearest viewport that they were indeed preparing to board. "We must leave," one of Talos's companions said urgently. "Now, before their ships prevent our departure." Talos looked at Marcus one final time. "Human Marcus Chen, if you truly wish to protect our young one, you must understand that entering our realm means leaving everything you know behind. You cannot return. For your own people would not understand what you have become." Marcus thought of his small quarters on the station, his routine work, his ordinary life among the asteroids. Then he looked at the injured youngling, still reaching for him with trust and affection in its ancient eyes. "I understand," he said. Talos nodded slowly, then spoke rapidly to his companions in their own language. One of them activated a device that created a shimmering field around all of them. "Wait!" Captain Rodriguez called out. "Chen, you can't just disappear. The consortium will demand explanations." "Tell them the truth," Marcus called back as the shimmering field began to intensify. "Tell them that sometimes doing the right thing matters more than following orders." The last thing Marcus saw of his old life was Commander Voss giving him a small salute of respect. Then the world dissolved into light and energy, and everything he had ever known vanished behind him. When the light faded, Marcus found himself on the deck of what could only be a Dragon Realm ship. The corridor around him was vast and beautiful, with walls that seemed to be carved from living crystal. The three dragon beings who had rescued him moved with purpose toward what appeared to be a command center. "The young one requires medical attention," Talos announced to someone Marcus couldn't see. A new voice responded, speaking in the dragon language. Marcus caught fragments, something about medical chambers and healing protocols. The youngling in Talos's arms was making softer sounds now, apparently comforted by being surrounded by its own kind. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Talos turned to look at him, and Marcus was struck again by the ancient intelligence in those eyes. "Now, human Marcus Chen, you face 5 strikes from the Council of Guardians. It is the price for bringing an outsider into our realm." 5 strikes? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Physical blows, delivered by our strongest warriors," Talos explained matter-of-factly. "Each strike can break bones, cause internal damage. Few survive all 5. None have ever willingly endured them for the sake of a youngling not their own. Marcus swallowed hard but stood straight. When? As soon as we reach the Protectorate's home station, Talos replied. But know this. Human. If you survive the 5 strikes, you will be granted a position among the elite protectors of our realm. Such an honor has never been offered to an outsider. The youngling made a soft sound and looked at Marcus with those trusting eyes. Despite the fear growing in his chest, Marcus felt his resolve strengthen. Then I'll survive them, he said quietly. I made a promise to protect this youngling, and I intend to keep it. Talos studied him for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. Perhaps there is more to humans than we believed, he said. We shall see. As the ship carried him toward an uncertain future, Marcus held the gaze of the small dragon he had sworn to protect and prepared himself for the greatest challenge of his life. Behind them, the human mining station grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, taking with it everything Marcus had ever known. But looking at the youngling's trusting expression, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same determination that had driven him to protect an injured child when no one else would. The real test, however, was yet to come. Marcus awakened to the sound of flowing water and gentle chimes, his entire body screaming with pain. Every breath sent sharp spikes of agony through his ribs, and when he tried to move, it felt as though molten metal was flowing through his veins instead of blood. He was lying on something soft, yet firm, and warm light was filtering through what appeared to be crystal walls. "The human stirs," a voice said in the dragon language, and Marcus was surprised to find that he could understand it more clearly than before. Perhaps the trauma had somehow enhanced his ability to process their speech patterns. "Remarkable," another voice replied. "The medical scanners indicate severe internal damage, multiple fractures, and significant tissue trauma. By our calculations, he should not have survived the 3rd strike, much less all 5. Marcus tried to open his eyes fully and found himself looking up at the most beautiful ceiling he had ever seen. It appeared to be made entirely of living crystal that pulsed with soft, healing light. Strange symbols moved across its surface in patterns that seemed to respond to his vital signs. "Where?" He tried to speak, but his throat felt like sandpaper. "Peace, human," a familiar voice said, and Marcus turned his head carefully to see Guardian Prime Talos approaching his bedside. The large dragon being moved with quiet grace, his emerald and gold scales seeming to glow in the crystal chamber's light. "You are in the Protectorate's healing center. You have been unconscious for 3 cycles. "The youngling," Marcus managed to ask. Talos's expression showed what might have been approval. "Your first concern is for another's welfare, even in your condition. The young one is well. Its injuries have healed, and it has been asking for you constantly. We have had difficulty preventing it from attempting to reach this chamber." Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, as pain flared throughout his body. "Take it easy," he told himself, then looked at Talos. Did I pass your test?" "You endured 5 strikes from our strongest warriors," Talos replied solemnly. "The first broke 3 ribs. The second shattered your left arm. The third caused internal bleeding that should have been fatal. The fourth damaged your spine severely enough that our healers expected permanent paralysis. The fifth—" Talos paused, and Marcus saw something like amazement in the ancient dragon's eyes. "The 5th strike was delivered by Guardian Commander Zorith himself, a blow that has never been survived by any being, of any species. It should have stopped your heart permanently. Instead, you looked at him and said, 'Is that all? I've got a youngling to protect.'" Marcus had no memory of that moment, but he wasn't surprised. Even now, with his body broken and healing, his primary concern was for the small dragon he had sworn to protect. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now," a new voice said, You join the elite protectors if you are capable of the training. Marcus turned his head to see another dragon being entering the chamber. This one was larger than Talos, with scales that shifted between deep bronze and gold. The newcomer's presence seemed to fill the room with an aura of command and barely contained power. "Guardian Commander Zorith," Talos said, inclining his head respectfully. Zorith approached Marcus's bedside and looked down at him with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of millennia. "I delivered the final strike," he said simply. "I have broken mountains with less force. Yet you survived, and more than that, you remained conscious and defiant. How?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I made a promise," he said finally. "Where I come from. We have a saying, a man is only as good as his word. I gave my word to protect that youngling, and I won't break it just because someone hits me hard." Zorith and Talos exchanged a look that Marcus couldn't interpret. "Your physical capabilities are inferior to ours in every measurable way," Zorith observed. "You are smaller, weaker, slower, and your lifespan is a fraction of ours. By all logic, you should have died during the first strike. Yet you endured all 5 and showed no sign of yielding. Explain this." Marcus thought about it for a moment, then shrugged carefully to avoid aggravating his injuries. "I guess humans are just stubborn that way. When we decide something matters, we don't give up easily." "Stubborn," Zorith repeated as if testing the word. "Is this a common trait among your species? When it comes to protecting something we care about?" "Yeah, pretty much," Marcus replied. "We've got a whole history of people doing impossible things when someone they love is threatened." Zorith nodded slowly. "This aligns with certain reports we have received about human behavior in combat situations. Your species has a reputation for succeeding through determination when superior forces fail through overconfidence." A soft, chiming sound filled the chamber, and Marcus heard the musical calls he had come to associate with his young charge. All 3 adults turned toward the entrance as the youngling appeared, moving carefully but with obvious excitement. The small dragon had grown noticeably in the 3 days Marcus had been unconscious. It was now about the size of a medium dog, and its scales had developed a deeper luster. Most importantly, its injuries were completely healed, and it moved with the natural grace of its species. "Kithara," Talos said gently, "the human needs rest." Kithara, apparently the youngling's name, made urgent musical sounds and approached Marcus's bedside. It looked up at him with those ancient, intelligent eyes and made soft cooing noises that somehow conveyed concern and affection. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly, carefully reaching out to stroke the young dragon's scales. "I'm okay, just a little banged up." Kithara responded by climbing carefully onto the bed and curling up next to Marcus, being extremely gentle around his injuries. The contact immediately made Marcus feel better, and he noticed that his pain levels seemed to decrease wherever Kithara was touching him. "Fascinating," Zorith murmured. "The young one is sharing its healing energy with you. This level of bonding typically requires years of close contact to develop." "Is that unusual?" Marcus asked. "Unprecedented," Talos replied. "Kithara has been exhibiting behaviors we have never observed before. It has been refusing food unless assured you were recovering. It attempted to break into this chamber multiple times. Most remarkably, it has been trying to communicate with our healers about your treatment, despite its limited vocabulary." Marcus looked down at the young dragon curled against his side. "You've been worrying about me, haven't you?" he said softly. Kithara made affirmative musical sounds and nuzzled closer to him. "The bond between you grows stronger," Zorith observed. "This presents both opportunities and challenges for your integration into our society." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Kithara is not simply any youngling," Talos explained. Its lineage traces back to the founding of our civilization. In human terms, you might call it royalty. Its protection and proper development are matters of highest priority for our entire species. Marcus felt a weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. You're saying I've accidentally adopted dragon royalty? In essence, yes, Zorith confirmed. Which means your training as an elite protector must be accelerated and intensified. You cannot adequately protect Cathara without understanding our ways, our threats, and our capabilities. Over the next several hours, Marcus learned more about dragon society than he had ever imagined possible. The Draconic Protectorate was an ancient civilization that spanned multiple star systems, with technology that seemed like magic to human understanding. They were guardians and peacekeepers, protecting younger species from threats they couldn't comprehend or handle alone. The elite protectors were their finest warriors, each one capable of single-handedly defending entire planets. They were also diplomats, strategists, and when necessary, the ultimate arbiters of justice in disputes between species. The training is intensive, Zorith warned Marcus as they discussed his future. You will be expected to master combat techniques that were developed over millennia. You must learn our technology, our philosophy, our history. Most importantly, you must understand the threats we face. What kind of threats? Marcus asked. Talos and Zorith exchanged another of their meaningful looks. There are forces in the galaxy that seek to exploit or destroy rather than protect, Talos explained. The consortium you fled is merely one example. There are others, species that have turned to conquest, artificial intelligences that view organic life as a problem to be solved, and ancient entities that predate our civilization. And you fight all of these things? When necessary, Zorith confirmed, but we prefer prevention to cure. Often our mere presence is sufficient to discourage aggressive action. The reputation of the elite protectors is considerable. Marcus was beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had gotten himself into. So, when do we start training? As soon as you can stand without assistance, Zorith replied. But first, you must understand that this path cannot be undone. Once you begin training as an elite protector, you become something more than human. The process changes you, physically, mentally, spiritually. You will still be yourself, but enhanced beyond anything your species has experienced. Enhanced how? Increased strength, speed, reflexes, Talos listed. Enhanced learning capacity and memory. Extended lifespan. You will live as long as we do, measured in millennia rather than decades. Most importantly, you will develop what we call the Guardian's Sight, the ability to perceive threats and opportunities that others cannot see. Marcus absorbed this information slowly. And the cost? You can never return to being merely human, Zorith said bluntly. Your own species would not recognize you as one of their own. You would be as alien to them as we are. Marcus looked down at Cathara, who was still curled against his side, radiating contentment and trust. The young dragon looked up at him as if sensing his thoughts, and Marcus felt that profound connection that had started this entire adventure. I already chose, he said quietly. When I decided to protect Kithra, I chose to leave my old life behind. If this is what it takes to keep my promise, then this is what I do. Zorith nodded approvingly. Spoken like a true guardian. Very well. Your formal training begins when the healers clear you for physical activity. Until then, you will begin learning our language, history, and basic philosophy. Over the next week, Marcus discovered that his capacity for learning had indeed been enhanced, though whether by the process Zorith had mentioned or simply by exposure to dragon society, he couldn't tell. He found himself absorbing information at a rate that would have been impossible before. He learned that the Draconic Protectorate had been watching human development for centuries, generally impressed by human adaptability, but concerned by their tendency toward violence and short-term thinking. His actions in protecting Kithara had challenged many of their assumptions about human nature. "Your species is young," Talos explained during one of their daily lessons. "Most species do not develop interstellar travel until they have learned to control their aggressive impulses. Humans achieve space travel while still engaging in planetary warfare, most unusual." "We're a complicated species," Marcus acknowledged. "But that same aggressiveness you're worried about is also what drives us to protect the people we care about." "Yes," Talos agreed. "This is what makes your case so interesting to our scholars. Human protective instincts appear to be unusually strong, even by galactic standards. Most species prioritize self-preservation above all else. Humans routinely sacrifice themselves for others, even strangers." Marcus thought about the heroes from human history, soldiers who had thrown themselves on grenades to save their comrades, civilians who had risked everything to protect the innocent during wars and disasters. "I guess we just figure some things are worth dying for. And this is why the Council of Guardians voted to accept you into our ranks," Zorith said, entering the chamber where Marcus was studying. "Your willingness to endure the 5 strikes for a youngling not your own demonstrated something we have rarely seen: true selflessness." "When do I get to start the physical training?" Marcus asked. His body had healed remarkably quickly, aided by dragon medical technology and what he suspected was continued energy sharing from Kithara. "Tomorrow," Zorith announced. "But I must warn you, the other elite protectors are not entirely convinced that a human can master our techniques. You will face skepticism and possibly hostility." "From your own people?" "Elite protectors are drawn from many species," Talos explained. "We have warriors from the crystalline worlds of Andros, the aquatic realms of Thalassa, the mountain kingdoms of Petra. Each brings their own strengths and prejudices. Some view humans as primitive upstarts." Marcus grinned, feeling more like himself than he had since arriving in dragon space. "Good thing I'm stubborn." "Indeed," Zorith said, with what might have been amusement. "That quality will serve you well. But remember, you are not just representing yourself. You are the first human to join our ranks. Your success or failure will determine whether others of your species might one day be considered for this honor." That night, Marcus lay in his crystal chamber with Kithara curled up beside him, thinking about the enormous responsibility he had accepted. He was about to undergo training that no human had ever experienced, to become something more than human while remaining essentially himself. The next morning, he was awakened by the sound of arrival chimes. Through his chamber's transparent walls, he could see massive ships settling onto landing platforms that stretched to the horizon. The other elite protectors were returning from their assignments across the galaxy. "Nervous?" Talos asked, entering the chamber with what appeared to be training gear sized for Marcus. Marcus stood up and began putting on the protective equipment. It was incredibly light despite appearing sturdy, and it seemed to adjust itself to fit him perfectly. Kithara made encouraging musical sounds and rubbed against his leg. "A little," Marcus admitted, "but I've come this far. Time to see what I'm really made of." As they walked toward the training grounds, Marcus could see other beings gathering, creatures of various species, all of them radiating the quiet confidence of elite warriors. Many were looking at him with obvious curiosity, and he caught fragments of conversation in multiple languages. "The human who endured 5 strikes? Smaller than expected. We shall see if courage compensates for physical limitations." Marcus straightened his shoulders and kept walking. He had endured 5 strikes from the strongest dragon warriors to protect a child. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same determination. After all, he had a promise to keep, and humans were very good at keeping their promises, no matter what the cost. The training ground was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. It stretched for miles in every direction, with sections that seemed to shift and change to simulate different environments. One area displayed the crystalline caves of Andros, another the underwater cities of Thalassa, and yet another the floating mountains of Skyholm. At the center was a raised platform where Guardian Commander Zorith waited with an assembled group of beings that could only be the elite protectors. Marcus counted at least 30 individuals from a dozen different species. There was a massive crystalline being that looked like living diamond, several aquatic humanoids whose skin glistened with moisture, creatures that appeared to be made of living stone, and others whose appearances defied easy description. All of them radiated power and confidence, and most were looking at Marcus with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Elite Protectors," Zorith announced as Marcus approached with Kythera at his side. "I present Marcus Chen of Earth, the first human to endure the 5 strikes and earn a place among our ranks." A crystalline being stepped forward, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. "With respect, Commander, surviving punishment is not the same as possessing the skills necessary for our calling. Has this human demonstrated any combat proficiency?" "I am Guardian Shalaris of the Andros Collective," the being continued, addressing Marcus directly. "I have served as an elite protector for over 3 centuries. In that time, I have defended 17 worlds and prevented 4 genocidal conflicts. What qualifications do you bring beyond stubborn endurance?" Marcus felt dozens of ancient, powerful gazes focusing on him. Kythera pressed closer to his leg, offering silent support. He took a breath and decided on honesty. "I don't have centuries of experience," he admitted. "I've never defended worlds or prevented genocides. Until a few weeks ago, I was a maintenance technician fixing air recyclers and power conduits. But I do know one thing. When someone I've sworn to protect is in danger, I won't quit until they're safe." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the group. An aquatic being with scales that shifted between blue and silver spoke up. "Noble sentiment, human. But what happens when your determination encounters an enemy that cannot be defeated through perseverance alone?" "I am Guardian Narissa of the Thalassan Depths. I have faced the Void Hunters, beings that consume entire star systems. They do not yield to stubborn courage." "Then I guess I'd have to find another way," Marcus replied. "Humans are pretty good at improvising when things get desperate." Guardian Zorith stepped onto the platform. "Enough debate. Let us see what the human can do. Guardian Shalaris, you will test his combat readiness. Standard evaluation protocol." The crystalline being moved to the center of the platform with fluid grace. "Very well. Human Marcus, show us what your species considers martial prowess." Marcus looked at the crystal warrior, easily twice his size and radiating power that made his bones ache. "What are the rules?" "Survive for 60 seconds, Shalaris replied simply. "Use any method you choose." Marcus stepped onto the platform, his mind racing. He had no formal combat training beyond basic self-defense courses required for station personnel. Shalaris was clearly far stronger, faster, and more experienced. In a direct confrontation, Marcus would lose within seconds. But humans had been facing superior opponents for millennia. They had learned to survive not through strength, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever it took to win. The moment Zorith signaled the start, Shalaris moved with incredible speed, crystalline fists cutting through the air where Marcus had been standing a split second before. Marcus rolled, came up running, and immediately began putting distance between himself and his opponent while studying the platform's surface and features. "Running will only delay the inevitable," Shalaris called out, pursuing with relentless efficiency. Marcus noticed that the platform's surface was not uniform. There were subtle variations in texture and material that indicated different properties. Some sections seemed designed for enhanced traction, others for shock absorption. More importantly, he spotted several small devices embedded in the platform's edges that looked like they might be training equipment controls. Shalaris cornered him against the platform's edge and launched a devastating punch that would have shattered human bones. Instead of trying to dodge or block, Marcus grabbed one of the training controls and activated it. Suddenly, the platform's gravity orientation shifted 90 degrees. Shalaris, unprepared for the change, found himself falling toward what had been a vertical wall, while Marcus, who had braced for the shift, managed to maintain his position. "Clever," the crystalline warrior admitted, adjusting to the new orientation with practiced ease. "But such tricks only work once." Marcus grinned and activated another control. This time, the platform surface became frictionless in patches, creating an obstacle course that forced both fighters to move carefully. But Marcus had noticed something important. Shalaris's crystalline structure made him heavier and less adaptable to surface changes. For the next 30 seconds, Marcus led the Crystal Warrior on a chase across the shifting platform, using environmental controls to create obstacles and hazards that he could navigate better than his larger opponent. He couldn't win a straight fight, but he could control the conditions of the engagement. "Time," Zorith announced. Marcus stood breathing hard but unharmed. Shalaris had not managed to land a single blow, despite his vastly superior combat abilities. "Interesting," Shalaris admitted. "You fought not as a warrior but as an engineer. You treated the combat as a technical problem to be solved rather than a contest of strength." "Where I come from, we call that working smarter, not harder," Marcus replied. Guardian Narissa flowed onto the platform. "Environment manipulation is a useful skill, but what of direct combat? Face me without technological assistance." The aquatic warrior was faster than Shalaris and clearly more experienced in hand-to-hand combat. Marcus found himself on the defensive immediately, barely avoiding strikes that cut through the air with lethal precision. But as the fight progressed, Marcus noticed patterns in Narissa's attacks. The Guardian was incredibly skilled, but her techniques were formal, following established patterns that suggested centuries of traditional training. Human combat, especially the desperate fighting techniques developed in Earth's more violent periods, followed no such traditions. When Narissa launched what should have been a finishing combination, Marcus did something no trained warrior would expect. He deliberately fell backward, grabbed his opponent's arm, and used his own falling weight to throw her over his head in a move that was part judo, part street fighting, and completely unpredictable. Narissa landed gracefully but looked surprised. "That technique is not in any combat manual I know." "Humans don't really follow manuals when we're fighting for our lives," Marcus explained, helping her to her feet. "We tend to make it up as we go along." Over the next hour, Marcus faced several more elite protectors in various tests. He lost every single combat encounter, but each loss taught the assembled Guardians something about human unpredictability and adaptability. Marcus's greatest asset wasn't strength or speed. It was his refusal to fight fair and his ability to think tactically even under pressure. The training session was interrupted by urgent chimes from the communication center. Guardian Zorith received a message that made his expression grow grim. "Elite Protectors," he announced, "we have received a distress signal from the research station at Kepler 7. They report that a consortium fleet has begun forcibly evacuating the planet's indigenous population for xenological study." A collective growl of anger rose from the assembled protectors. Marcus didn't fully understand the implications, but the reactions around him made it clear that this was exactly the kind of situation they existed to prevent. "The indigenous species is pre-spaceflight but highly intelligent," Zorith continued. "The consortium is claiming they need protection from an approaching asteroid impact, but our sensors detect no such threat. This appears to be a cover for mass abduction." Guardian Shalaris stepped forward. "What is our response authorization?" "The Council has approved direct intervention," Zorith replied. However, we face a complication. The consortium has deployed new shield technology that our standard weapons cannot penetrate. They appear to have reverse-engineered technology from the Void Hunter attacks last year. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered the consortium's attempts to capture Kithra for experimentation. If they were now forcibly abducting entire populations of intelligent beings. What kind of shield technology? He asked. Zorith looked at him with surprise. The details are highly technical. I'm an engineer, Marcus reminded him. Maybe I can help. For the next several minutes, Zorith explained the consortium's new defensive systems. They had developed shields that could absorb and redirect energy-based weapons, making traditional dragon fire and crystal projection ineffective. The shields were powered by massive generators that were heavily defended and appeared to be based on principles stolen from Void Hunter technology. As Marcus listened, his mind began working on the problem from an engineering perspective. The other protectors were thinking like warriors, looking for ways to overcome the shields through superior firepower. But Marcus was thinking like a technician who had spent years keeping complex systems running. The power requirements for those shields must be enormous, he said. And if they're based on Void Hunter tech, they probably require exotic matter for fuel. That means they can't run continuously without regular resupply. Your point? Guardian Narissa asked. My point is that shields like that always have weaknesses, Marcus explained. Usually in the power distribution network or the cooling systems. If I could get close enough to examine the setup. Impossible, Shalaris declared. The consortium fleet is massive, and they will be expecting us. Any approach would be detected long before we could reach their shield generators. Marcus looked at Kithara, who had been listening intently to the discussion with obvious concern. The young dragon understood enough to know that other beings were in danger. What if they weren't expecting us? Marcus asked slowly. What if we used the one thing they would never suspect? All eyes turned to him. The consortium knows about dragons, about crystal warriors, about all the species represented here, Marcus continued, but they don't know about humans working with the protectors. They think I'm dead or captured, lost when the dragon ships left the mining station. Understanding dawned on several faces. You're suggesting infiltration, Zorith said. I'm suggesting I go in first, disguised as a human refugee or prisoner, Marcus explained. I get close to their shield generators, find the weak points, and create an opening for the rest of you to attack. The risk is enormous, Guardian Narissa pointed out. If you're captured, the consortium will realize that humans are working with us. It could compromise future operations. And if we don't stop them now, they'll abduct an entire species, Marcus countered. Sometimes you have to take risks to do what's right. Kithara made urgent musical sounds and pressed against Marcus's leg. The young dragon was clearly distressed by the idea of him going into danger. I know, little one, Marcus said softly, kneeling to look into Kithara's ancient eyes. But this is what guardians do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Zorith studied Marcus for a long moment. You have been an elite protector for less than a day, and you're volunteering for one of the most dangerous missions we've undertaken this year. Someone has to, Marcus replied, and I'm the only one here who can pass for a captured human. The debate that followed was intense, with several protectors arguing that Marcus was too inexperienced for such a crucial mission. But in the end, the logic of his proposal was undeniable. He was their best chance of getting close enough to the consortium shields to find their vulnerabilities. 2 hours later, Marcus found himself aboard a disguised shuttle approaching the consortium fleet. He was dressed as a mining station refugee, complete with fabricated identification and a cover story about escaping the dragon attack on his station. Hidden in his clothing were sophisticated scanning devices that would allow him to analyze the shield generators up close. The consortium bought his story completely. They were so focused on their abduction operation and watching for dragon ships that the possibility of human infiltrators never occurred to them. Marcus was processed as a refugee and assigned to temporary quarters on one of their support vessels, a ship that happened to be located right next to the main shield generator array. Over the next 12 hours, Marcus played the role of a traumatized survivor while systematically mapping the consortium's defenses. His engineering background allowed him to identify exactly what the dragons had missed. The shield generators had a critical vulnerability in their thermal regulation system. If that system was overloaded, the generators would automatically shut down to prevent explosion. More importantly, Marcus discovered that the consortium was planning to complete their operation within the next 18 hours. After that, they would jump to hyperspace with their captives, making rescue impossible. Using a concealed communicator, Marcus transmitted the shield vulnerability data to the waiting dragon fleet. But as he prepared to create the diversion that would allow the protectors to attack, he overheard something that changed everything. The consortium wasn't just abducting the planet's population for study. They were planning to use them as test subjects for new weapons designed specifically to kill dragons. Marcus felt a cold fury settle over him. These weren't researchers pursuing knowledge. They were genocidal monsters preparing to commit atrocities against both the indigenous population and his adopted family among the dragons. That night, Marcus made his move. Instead of simply overloading the thermal regulators as planned, he decided to do something more decisive. Using his maintenance access codes and engineering knowledge, he began systematically sabotaging critical systems throughout the consortium fleet. He started with their communication array, cutting their ability to coordinate between ships. Then he moved to their navigation systems, introducing subtle errors that would prevent accurate hyperspace jumps. Finally, he reached the shield generators and prepared to create a window for the dragon attack. But as he worked on the final sabotage, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Someone had discovered his activities. "Human infiltrator in Section 7, came the announcement over the ship's speakers. "All security teams respond immediately." Marcus finished his work on the shield generators and activated the overload sequence. Throughout the consortium fleet, shield generators began shutting down as their thermal regulation systems failed catastrophically. As consortium security forces closed in on his position, Marcus sent a final message to the Dragon fleet. "Shields down. Package delivered. Give them hell." The response came in the form of dragonfire, lighting up the darkness of space. Guardian Shalaris's crystal projectiles punched through unshielded hull plating like tissue paper. Guardian Narissa's aquatic combat forms flowed through the consortium ships, disabling weapons and freeing captives. The other elite protectors struck with surgical precision, targeting key systems while avoiding areas where prisoners were held. The consortium fleet, caught completely off guard and stripped of their defensive advantages, found themselves facing opponents they couldn't match. Within 30 minutes, their entire operation was in ruins. Marcus fought his way through the chaos, using emergency maintenance shafts and his knowledge of ship layouts to stay ahead of pursuit. His goal wasn't escape, it was reaching the detention centers where the indigenous population was being held. He found them in the cargo holds of the main transport ship, hundreds of terrified beings who looked vaguely humanoid, but with distinctive features that marked them as an entirely different species. They had been sedated and restrained, clearly prepared for transport to research facilities. "It's okay," Marcus told them as he began releasing restraints and disabling sedation systems. "You're going home. The cavalry has arrived." As he worked, one of the indigenous beings, apparently a leader among them, approached cautiously. "You are not like the others who took us," the being observed in accented but understandable English. "No," Marcus agreed. "I'm here to help. My friends and I are going to get you back to your planet safely." The being studied Marcus with intelligent eyes that reminded him of Cathara. "You fight for people who are not your own kind. This is unusual among the star travelers we have encountered." "Maybe," Marcus said, working on the last of the restraints. "But where I come from, we believe that when someone needs help, you help them. Doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from." By the time the elite protectors boarded the transport ship, Marcus had freed all the prisoners and was organizing their evacuation. Guardian Zorith found him in the cargo hold, helping injured beings to the rescue shuttles. "The consortium fleet has been neutralized," Zorith reported. "Their research data has been confiscated and their personnel are in custody. The planet's population will be returned safely." Marcus nodded, then looked at the being who had spoken to him earlier. "What will happen to your people now?" "We return to our world," the being replied. "But we will remember that there are those among the star travelers who protect rather than exploit. Perhaps one day, we will be ready to join the greater community of worlds." As the rescue operation concluded, and the freed captives were transported back to their home planet, Marcus found himself back aboard the Dragon flagship with Cathara curled contentedly in his lap. The young dragon had grown noticeably during the crisis, and its scales now showed the deep luster of approaching adolescence. "Your first mission as an elite protector was eventful," Guardian Zorith observed, settling into a seat across from Marcus. "Did I pass?" Marcus asked. "You infiltrated a hostile fleet, disabled their defenses single-handedly, fought your way through armed opposition to free hundreds of captives, and prevented both an abduction and a genocide," Zorith listed. "I would say you exceeded expectations." Guardian Shalaris approached, his crystalline form reflecting the light from the viewport stars. "I owe you an apology, human Marcus. I questioned whether courage alone could substitute for experience. You have demonstrated that human tactical thinking and adaptability are formidable weapons in their own right. The other protectors are calling it the human gambit," Guardian Narissa added with what might have been amusement. "A strategy so unexpected that enemies cannot prepare for it because it defies conventional tactical wisdom." Marcus stroked Cathara's scales and felt the deep contentment that came from a job well done. "We just call it doing what needs to be done." Over the following months, Marcus completed his formal training as an elite protector. He learned to fight with weapons that channeled energy like contained stars, to pilot ships that could fold space itself, and to navigate the complex diplomacy of a galactic community. But his greatest asset remained his humanity, his refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable, his protective instincts, and his ability to find unconventional solutions to impossible challenges. Cathara grew alongside him, developing into a magnificent young dragon whose intelligence and compassion reflected the bond they shared. The youngling had learned as much from Marcus about determination and sacrifice as Marcus had learned from Dragon Society about honor and responsibility. "You have changed our understanding of what it means to be a guardian," Guardian Commander Zorith told Marcus one day as they watched Cathara practicing flight maneuvers with other young dragons. "We have always believed that strength and ancient wisdom were the primary qualifications for protecting others. You have shown us that sometimes the most important quality is simply the refusal to give up when someone needs help." Marcus watched his young charge soar through the crystal spires of the Dragon City, free and safe and growing into everything it was meant to be. "I just kept a promise," he said. "Where I come from, that's what you do." In the years that followed, the name Marcus Chen became legend among the protectorates. He was the human who had endured 5 strikes for a youngling not his own, who had awakened among the Dragon Realm's elite protectors, and who had proven that sometimes the greatest strength came not from power or wisdom, but from the simple determination to do the right thing, no matter the cost. And in the crystal halls where young dragons learned the stories of great guardians, they always told the tale of the small human who kept his promise, and the dragon youngling who taught him that some bonds transcend species, time, and space itself. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of those who needed protection. And as long as there were guardians like Marcus Chen willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, there was always hope, even if it took enduring 5 strikes to prove it.